to hold space for someone, to me, it draws on all of my senses. So, my feeling, clairsentient, my thoughts being directed, to them and whatever the situation is at hand for them. Listening with more than just my ears, and adopting a energetic or a way of being that is both grounded and in myself, but radiating that out for them to attune to.
I'll have what she's having.
Welcome, friends. This is I'll Have What She's Having, and I am your podcast host, Amber Samea. This is a podcast featuring the voices of women from all walks of life, and it's a place where conversation becomes medicine. Just by being here, you're including yourself in a circle of incredible women who offer valuable insights into their life ways. I hope that listening to this podcast brings you joy, puts a smile on your face, gives you a sense of interconnectedness, and also the relief that comes from knowing you're not alone. I encourage you to grab a cup of tea, maybe a journal, maybe run a bath, and just enjoy this long-form experience of listening to women speak meaningfully to each other. So glad that you're here, and enjoy the episode. Today, we are going to be speaking with the beautiful, incredible Juliette Woods. Juliette perceives subtle shifts in the wind with a turn of her fingertips, speaks stories from unseen realms to listening hearts and ears. She navigates the currents of the natural world, remembering and witnessing. Slow cooks rich brews for soul food feasting. Makes marks of medicine and births, beings with purpose, hears the tide change its course and sings to the seals from the shore. She senses rightness through the hairs on her arms and the touch of her beloved when afar. A truth teller, a way shower, a holder of sacred space, she has been called teacher, spiritual leader, mother, lover. She has been named Banfasa, Earth Selkie, Sovereign Weaver, Dream Maker. My friend Juliette walks between and within worlds in ceremony and reciprocity. Welcome, Juliette. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Oh, I was lost in your words.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful reflection on your essence. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just want to start moving right into some flow of questions for you, so that our listeners can start to get an understanding of who you are in the world. And this intro is such a beautiful poetic expression of who you are. But I wonder, for the first question, if you could just tell us a little bit about your practice, your spiritual practice, and what you offer as a teacher and the healer.
Oh, okay. Well, I have been shown and called to hold space and provide opportunity for people to gather in ceremony and cultivate their soul needs,
Mm-hmm.
and reestablish and reconnect with some of this spiritual side that is so often overlooked and forgotten in today's world and today's demands. And for most of us, whether we are diaspora or settlers or even indigenous to these lands, so many of us are quite removed from our cultural practices and our inherited traditions. And so these opportunities are really designed to just gently facilitate that exploration and bringing spiritual practice into a way of living rather than something that we just do sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things I love about you is this concept that you often bring up of living a soul-filled life. And I've heard that mentioned quite a few times by you. So I just wanted to ask you and kind of use that as a jumping in point. Like, what does it mean to live a soul-filled life? What does that hold for you in having used those words?
Mm. Well, that's a big question.
Yeah. you know,
You know,
do your best, do your best.
well, I feel like the the term return to reverence, it came to me a couple of years ago actually, and I feel like it really speaks to that. It's bringing back a reverence for everything that we are doing and attributes you perhaps like a greater meaning or a greater richness, a more sensual experience of everything that we're doing. And it could be as mundane as sweeping the house or um, picking flowers or going for a walk or washing the dishes. And so really just bringing in that reverence and that sense of something other. There's a spirit infused way of looking at things and regarding things, and
Yeah.
really is a nice contrast or balm to the commercialized consumerism world that we are often shown as reality.
Yes. Well, and I have to say too, in spending time with you, especially spending time with you in your own home space at the sanctuary, I it almost immediately upon being there, I have this sense of everything being a gift. It's like this yeah, it's like embodying this reconnection to life as gift, to
Mm.
earth as gift, to water as gift. And everywhere I look around your property, that sense of reverence for that gift is marked, right? Like the cairn that's at the front of your property where we can take rocks and from the beach and put them there each time and see this beautiful gradual building of intention and just the artwork that's in your space and the funny little dude that greets you when you get to the door. I can't remember his name, but yes, she's made this incredible creature from wood and different materials. And yeah, just even that sense in being there when we're sweeping the floor and you've said, or Pat's a friend of ours who's been with us at your place has reminded me that when I'm sweeping, I can sweep, some of the stuff that I'm, even holding or feeling or thinking and just like sweep it right out the door. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And so there's just this amazing sense that you really embody and I think inspire in those around you and in your space of that soulfulness and that sense of gift and reverence for that gift. And I just so appreciate you for that because it's not something I encounter very often to the extent that I actually feel like I'm shifting gears when I move into your space, into your energy. So
That
thank
really
you for
affirms my
that.
thoughts.
Thank you for that. And other things too. I've noticed, even in the way that you speak about your offerings and the website that you have created that I've been following, like everything is just so beautiful and so intentional and so thoughtful. And, there is this sense of richness to everything that you make. And that, is one of the reasons I really wanted to speak with you on this podcast, because I think that you have the pulse of this, stepping into flow with life and into reverence. And that sort of brings me to my next question, which is basically, how did you slow down? How did you get to this place of living a soul-filled and also a slow cooked life, one that is slowed down enough and you can be present enough to that you can be in these subtleties and you can create this kind of magic? How did that happen for you?
It's also another big question.
I'm full of those.
I like them. This is where the good stuff is. I think you actually sort of said it, is just bringing presence to everything. If I'm talking with someone, I like to give them my full and complete presence as much as I'm able at that moment. If I'm folding laundry or cloth, I like to try to bring as much presence and mindfulness to that. And so I think that's really where it began, is I just began really observing and sensing with all of my capabilities, all of my senses. And just by nature of that, it just infiltrates everything that we're doing.
Yeah. I think there are definitely a lot of barriers or perceived barriers, though, for many people, myself included, when I think about the kind of reverence and the kind of pace that I want to be moving in my life. And I'm the first to admit that I'm a person who is still, and I think I said this the other night and we kind of laughed about it, that I'm like striving for slowness. Yeah. And I'm like working really hard and fast to get slowed down, which is such a paradox. But it's sort of true, right? It's this recognition of all that's important to me and all that I value and the healing work that I want to see happen in my life. It's not going to be possible I think in the way that I know it's possible, unless I can actually go down to that slow cooked, slow pace, paying attention, listening deeply, that place in my life. And so that has been a very conscious and intentional pathway for me. And I've had to make choices that have been a bit difficult at times to do that, like quitting jobs that, oh my goodness, I was going so hard and so fast and supporting so many people and so drained that the only thing I wanted to do at the end of the day was basically nothing, or, eat a bag of potato chips and watch Netflix, which is not
sometimes.
Oh yeah. And that's fine sometimes, but it's more that sense of being away from yourself. And I know that there's so many women that are so hungry to have that return to themselves and that return to connection and reverence for all life that I think is inherent in a lot of us. So I know for me, there has had to be like some choices along my path in the last few seasons, there's a train coming, so we might hear that, to consciously sort of pare back, pare back layer by layer until I've created a little bit more space. And even a little bit more space has been incredible in terms of what it has allowed me to experience and how much deeper my connection has gotten. So yeah, just in thinking about that for yourself, what were some of the layers that you had to pare back, or what were some of the ways of being and engaging in the world that needed to shift for you in order to create this slow cooked version of Juliette's life?
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like you've said, some of the answer there too is just that very conscious and sometimes very difficult choices,
Yeah.
and all in service to our most deepest personal needs, and it can be everything from, I say no a lot to people. I say no, thank you. I try to be kind. A
You
lot.
say it nicely.
I can try.
Mm-hmm.
To a lot of offers, a lot of invitations. Sometimes I'll ask if I can be very last minute about deciding if I can commit to something or not, and I'll just gauge how my energy level is at the time. I try to drop sort of the social construct or the personality, so that I don't get caught up in, feeling that I should meet with somebody, or um, that it would be, I've said no before, or this kind of thing. And I try just to scale it back to the energetic of it. What are my needs right now? What is the energetic of what I'd be walking into, and making a choice from there.
And I know that is sometimes the biggest challenge too, is the communication of that, and how to also be unapologetic about it. And I wanted to break that. I want to break that down a little bit, because I think it's important to many people, is that when we talk about saying no, or, there's this popular meme right now of getting on the no train, which was funny because as we were talking about that, there was a train going by. So we got on it. But getting on the no train, and I like it. It's the sassy way of thinking about sort of not overcommitting yourself. But also in this learning how to say no, and I don't know if you relate to this or not, but I'll share my part, is recognizing that there's like an entire paradigm of overextension that's become normal to us. It's been normalized in our culture that you just do things nonstop all the time, right? And it's also, event fatigue is a real thing. When even in the community that I live in Squamish, that you were a part of before, there could be, 5 different events that you have invitations to in one weekend, or even in one evening.
Yeah.
And they're all things that you could enjoy or might love to do. Or there are friends there that you support, that you would love to, have your presence there to support them. But there is definitely an emergence of this awareness for a lot of people, and women in my circle in particular, where it's this recognition of it's not just that I'm getting on the no train, it's that I'm trying to redefine the parameters of what amount of things is actually healthy for me to be holding in any one given season of my life.
I think that's a very good way of putting it. Realizing that some of these things that maybe on the surface just sounds easy to do, like going for tea with someone, there's actually quite a lot of energetic exchange or navigation that happens with that. And depending on what else you have going on in your life, whether it is a 9-to-5 job, or whether it's relationships, or whether
Kids.
me and my job, I'm really navigating a lot of energy with people all the time, as well as my own. And so to go for tea sounds easy and sweet and lovely, but it's actually, and I say this with love to all my dear friends, it's actually work.
Yeah.
And so if it's my moon time, if I've had a difficult week parenting, maybe I've had a few clients that needed extra hand holding, then tea is not restorative for me. What would be more restorative would be to nap and to do some art, You asked me earlier about this, the soul-filled life, the soul-filled living, and that's a big part of it, is making sure that there is an ample amount of what really, really fills our cup back up.
Yes.
Whether it is painting or poetry or yoga or um, good food, this kind of thing, and and it's not easy. I can definitely with certainty tell you that I have had friendships and relationships fall away um, because the energetic dynamic just was not, um, it was taking me out of myself. It was pulling me away from myself. It was pulling me into more tending and more holding,
Yep.
of others. And we can really love friends and people from a healthy distance, perhaps, so that we're not overextending ourselves. Because, like you say, we are living in a time of great overstimulation, and so
Yep.
anything that can just be a little bit more pleasant on the senses, and everything, and that kind of brings me back to this, my home space as well, is my intention is for ease on our nervous system. We have so much else happening, especially if we're connected to any sort of news or media. We used to only be exposed to the traumatic events of our clan or our community, and now we're exposed to the global atrocities, and
Yeah.
it's a lot. And so anytime that we can bring, particularly in our home spaces, an ease to our nervous system, whether it's hanging a painting that just gives you a relief when you look at it, or arranging the furniture so that there is nice flow to it or harmony to it,
Mm-hmm.
it really helps us preserve our vitality.
Yes. Yeah, and I think also if you are working in the area of, being a guide for people who are in their healing processes, or being a wise woman, and there's many other words I could use. So insert your word, whoever you are, teacher, leader, coach, doctor, whatever it is. Um, what I've noticed in my own life is that there can be, without people realizing it, so total grace and compassion here, but there can be almost an expectation that I am the person to go to for help or for
Yeah.
advice. And that it's almost like I have an endless spring of of availability to help people navigate through crisis, or through personal challenge, or to be that person when nobody else will listen to them, that I can listen to them. And there are times where I do want to be available for people in that way. There are deeply beautiful human beings who I really want to encourage and love, and vice versa, be encouraged and be loved. But I know that what I've had to navigate, even in the last year, is the sense of being accessible,
Mhm.
for that kind of support at any time. And as I also work with women who are dealing with actual very acute trauma, and working for a women's center in a transition house, um, I I had to recognize that I couldn't do that kind of work and then also in my everyday life be giving an output of support to a lot of other people as well. And I actually had to come to that place of like, okay, how am I going to be in self friendship here, and
Mhm.
start to really pay attention to how my energy is actually being drained, because I know that I want to be able to give from the overflow of my cup, not from like not dipping into my actual cup, right? And I think that's like an important distinction that has come up for me, is that um my part of my own journey of caring for myself and seeing myself as valuable has really led me to this point of needing to have my cup be filled up. And often my cup being filled up has a lot to do with me just being by myself.
Yeah.
And painting and writing and being in the woods, or just spending time with my partner, who is, just so mellow and gentle.
Right.
And then if I've had that time and space, there's an overflow, because it fills me up so much that I'm like brimming over. And that's when I feel the most vibrant and the most able to give and to share and to be in flow with others. And so that's how I'm sort of starting to gauge my energy output decisions. Am I in overflow right now? Is my cup full and overflowing, or am I feeling depleted? Because if I'm feeling depleted and I'm about to go out and like hold space for a bunch of people, what am I going to feel like after that? Right? Especially if I'm not certain that there's going to be like a receiving and a reciprocity coming back to me specifically and intentionally from others. And so that's kind of a long-winded journey, but I just want to give presence to that there is there is relationship choices and service, and how we're in service and community, and even through our own businesses and our work. And those choices can be a little bit difficult, especially if we have been so accessible to people before that.
Yeah, and I really think it brings up a couple of really good points. On the one hand, many of us are taught directly or indirectly to support everyone who asks,
Yes.
and really so, and that's just not sustainable, especially in these times of instant messaging and we all shop at the same store and this kind of thing, and the other part that I feel is relevant is, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit, is about how to be in circle. And you could also say how to be in relationship with or right relationship with your insert profession, whether it's chiropractor or soul mentor or spiritual advisor or lawyer or whoever, and what really made this quite apparent to myself is, in my mind, it always defaults to buying bananas, because
explain.
Well, what I found was, is I was unable to go to the market or to the store to just simply buy bananas without having to actually work at the same time. Usually somebody would come up to me and and it's that very subtle and tender line to hold, because when we're in this kind of work space holding for people and our friends, it's very easy for folks to feel like they're just sharing or they're just catching up, but actually we're being called to hold more space, and we're doing our energetic work all of a sudden on the fly. It's like, I just came to buy bananas, but all of a sudden I'm hearing of some significant traumas unexpectedly, and I'm having to ground my energy, hold space for them, kind of put a little bit of a bubble up around us from all the everybody else who's just shopping and maybe stepping into conversation with us as well, and so the buying of the bananas, sometimes we just want to buy bananas, and that
tweetable quote from Juliette: sometimes we just want to buy bananas.
just want to buy bananas. But and we can definitely have a piece in that, in boundary or being able to express our needs. But there's also a piece that the other could be holding perhaps a little bit more mindfully, and around how they approach people, or when and where they're sharing and what. And I think that a lot of that disparity comes simply from our culture right now, where we don't grow up sitting at the feet of our grandparents, listening to their long-winded, slowly told stories, and we show the respect and we are enraptured in their presence. We don't have that. We don't have the same modeling of how to keep our own sharing in appropriate measure. And I think even though we have social media where we can just have verbal diarrhea and like have podcasts and videos and articles and things like that at our fingertips, I think there's a lot of us who don't actually feel heard. And so
Yes.
when we get that opportunity to be heard, sometimes that self-regulation really is missed, because it's just such a medicine to be heard and to be held, that a lot of times, and I'm guilty of it too, of course, we'll just grab onto that opportunity and drink deeply from that well, not realizing that we're actually drinking that well dry.
Drink a little water, feel a little better. You do what you gotta, babe. Breathe a little air. Bring life into your muscles, instinct for a living man. Oh, but there is one thing you're all forgetting. That endless morning will turn to night. And when you're dreaming, you will be seeing a little demon dancing around. Baby, there is only one way, and that's the slow decay. Get a little earthy with me. I'll pull you down like rain. So tired, I can tell from your shape. Feeling sleepy, yeah, you can beat the slow decay. Don't know what I'm saying. Life, it is confusing. Longer if you're choosing right. Read between the lines. It doesn't really matter. All that we possess is time. It's funny how you keep running away from slumber, although you can't. And when you're dreaming, you will be seeing a little demon dancing around. Baby, there is only one way, and that's the slow decay. Get a little earthy with me. I'll pull you down like rain. So tired, I can tell from your shape. Feeling sleepy, yeah, you can beat the slow decay.
All of this for me ties back into just this really deep need for each of us in our own lives to have that slowed down time to be connecting with ourselves, to be connecting with the earth, and having the ability, and I don't want to say to self-regulate, because I think that can be a tricky one, because I think that in certain situations self-regulation is maybe not totally possible.
Yeah, a lot of onus on the person.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, like it is coming back around to this dynamic of how do we create healthy community, and how are we in circle together, and how can we be caring for ourselves but also know how to respect and care for each other.
Interesting, I think, when I'm just going to interject for a moment, because I find that my deepest connections are those where we can be comfortably together without words. We can share without any talking at all. You and I have done this, or friend Pat, who we've mentioned already, we've all done this, where we'll step into a ceremonial creative space together,
Yeah.
or we'll go to the beach and we'll sit together and quietly, or when I used to hold sacred places, solo spaces, we would walk into our place in nature without, there was no talking.
Yeah.
Set an
I love
intention,
that.
and we would go in together, and then we would take space, our individual space, but we still could feel the other people. We weren't alone. And so I wonder too if some of this craving for community, because I know for myself, as much as I crave connection, when I hear craving community, there's a part of me that does shrink back because of the demands, perhaps, that are put on each other. And I think, I wonder how much of that is speech related.
Yeah, like to do with our language and how we speak to each other and engage with each other.
Yeah, there's just more ways that we can connect and feel each other's presence, perhaps more deeply than conversation alone.
And actually, this is kind of maybe a good point to segue into something else that I have been really curious about, and I know you have spoken about at different times. So I'll start with a question, because it might be kind of fun to hear your answer and move from there. But speaking about language, what do we mean when we talk about something like holding space for each other? What are we doing when we are holding space?
I love your powerful questions. I'm sure that there's probably as many answers to that as there are people. But for me, I think it really brings it back to the presence, and which also brings it back to our own self-care and being able to keep ourselves in right relation energetically. To hold space for someone, to me, it draws on all of my senses. So my feeling, clairsentient feeling, energetic feeling, my thoughts being directed, to them, and whatever the situation is at hand for them. Listening with more than just my ears, and adopting a energetic or a way of being that is both grounded and in myself, but radiating that out for them to attune to, and holding just holding them with some love, or holding love, and allowing that frequency to be felt by them. And that could be whether it's in prayer work, or just sitting with them, or in ceremony, being really mindful that they are going through something, and then sort of being that supportive presence on all the different levels.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. And I think really, really valuable insight on that. I often think about holding space I think about it in sort of an imaginative way, of actually picturing myself on a bench, and there's a spot next to me, and I am holding a spot for that person, which is, in my mind, kind of having this awareness that they exist, that they are feeling and experiencing something, and that possibly if they're in crisis or something's going on, that they can't actually sit beside me right now, but I'm still going to hold that space for them and be thinking about them and be kind of energetically keeping them in my awareness, right? And it's just a simple way that I kind of came up to for myself, because I was having a lot of dialogue with many people, and you included around language. And this is an important and beautiful topic, is the language that we use. And so another one that we've talked about, there's a couple more, we're gonna break some things down here,
Yeah.
is when we do have someone in community, or an individual, a child, anyone that we are wanting to be praying for or sending thoughts and intentions towards. Again, insert whatever word you use for whatever practice you have, because there is so many different practices around how we care for each other energetically. But there is, particularly in the spaces that I am involved in, there are a lot of things like, I'm sending you my love, I'm holding you in my prayers, or I'm seeing you in your highest light. There, these kinds of expressions. And I think that they all come from such a deep place of genuine care and love. But I wanted to talk about the language side of that with you. So this is kind of a two-part question. And then also the permission side of that. Like, what is happening there between the person who is receiving, on the receiving end of all of those thoughts, prayers, intentions, candles lit, whatever it is, and the person or peoples that are sending or giving that? What is that relationship, and how can we make it one that is respectful and safe and not harmful?
Okay, yeah.
Bam.
All right, let me back up a little bit here. So I remember you and I talking about, what was it? I'll be with you in spirit. You and I talked about that, and we equated it to the LOL of the
yeah. It's like, are you actually laughing out loud? No.
Yeah.
Are you
like,
actually with me in spirit?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Did you send some of you to be with us today at this time? I think probably not.
Yeah.
What perhaps is more accurate is, it would be lovely to attend, but I am not able to.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
or I wish that I could feel what you're feeling there, but we have to be careful with that too,
yeah.
right?
But I'm not going to be there in any way. Like, like that's what we were laughing about, is I'm not going to be there physically or spiritually.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm looking for that response next time I invite you to something. I will laugh hysterically. Like, I will not be there physically or spiritually.
I'll send an RSVP no from my spirit.
Yeah. But it's true though, because I mean, as much as we would like to, it's not actually accurate. We're not being sincere with our language, and yet, for those of us who really do recognize the power of our word, and how we perhaps are less trained or less mindful currently of our language and the potency that has, when we say things, for example, the weekend, like you said, with 5 events, and we're like, I'm with you in spirit, I'm with you in spirit, and it's like, did you inadvertently cast parts of yourself off, awareness or what have you, to 5 different places, and you don't even realize it? How many times have we gone and done that? And are we really running with a full cup? Are we really running as a full being, whole and complete? Or have we accidentally, not just with I'll be with you in spirit. I mean, there's all sorts of things, when our child or a loved one goes away, it's very easy to send some of us with them because we love them and we're worried about them. Or when we really long to be somewhere, it's pretty easy to accidentally push some of our energy away from us. And so being mindful about things like that, help keep us whole and complete and with a fuller cup just naturally, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the piece about the permissions, I find that I find that as we just recently experienced, I feel like I'm often the one with the unpopular opinion or stance on
Hey,
which is, it's good. It's good. It's fine. Um, and we are compassionate beings. We want to help and support, and yet we also most of us probably know the adage or the story of helping the butterfly out of the cocoon, and therefore because those wings weren't able to press and push as they are meant to, they're not actually strong enough to fly, and so our helping is actually a hindrance.
yeah,
And so really not intending to minimize anyone's trauma or tragedy or dark nights of the soul. That's not what I'm not intending to mitigate any of that.
mm-hmm.
And yet in those times, that is when we find, and you might not even see it ever, let alone at the end of it, but from what I've witnessed and what I've experienced, those dark nights, those traumas, are when our soul is really refined. We find our strengths that we didn't know we even had, just for the sheer surviving of it. The medicines and the lessons that can come through that are life changing, and so we have to be wary of that as well.
Yeah,
And it's particularly hard when it's a child or someone who is such a light in our lives, or even maybe someone we know who just has such suffering all the time. It's very easy to have our compassion engaged and want to help them through prayer or energy work or just our love, this kind of thing, and that's beautiful. But what I often come against, because I offer this kind of work too. I offer to light candles on altars for people. I offer to speak their names into circles and hold them, and so I've come up against this quite a lot. Is we can only speak for our own selves. We can only give permission for our own self. And it's very, very easy to think that we're helping when it's, our sister or our mother or our friends. And we really want to tap them into some greater supports, but they don't know that it's happening.
right.
Or we think, well, if I was to ask, I'm sure they would say yes. Or my higher self checked with their higher self and their higher self says yes. Well, which is lovely, but back down on the sort of human sort of level, just like we were talking earlier about the navigation of energies, incoming energies or draws, even though they might be quote unquote like helpful, it's still more to manage. And if you're going along and you're in a sensitive place, and then all of a sudden you have 50 people projecting at you, whether it's love or not, and maybe some of it is not in love, right? That just becomes a lot more to navigate there. And if they were open to it and they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to have 50 people praying for me, I'm going to open up to that. That's a different space.
Yeah, it's an open and receiving mind and heart and
Yeah.
spirit, right? And just to sort of add to that, and I want you to continue, but I did, I have read and studied quite a bit about the impact of group meditation and group intention holding, just out of pure curiosity, because there have been some pretty interesting studies done in the transcendental meditation community where they would meditate on a specific area of the world. And I will put this in show notes just so everybody knows so that you can look at what I'm talking about. And they would meditate, like thousands of people from around the world would meditate on basically seeing the end of violence or a reduction of violence and more peace in certain areas of the world. And then they would notice in the coming days after that meditation that there was actually like a quite significant reduction in the violence that was being reported or was being noticed by people that lived there. And so I found that really interesting because it was a group, like thousands of people around the world, but it was more of a general, like collective, like the collective psyche kind of thing. It wasn't just directed to one individual person. It was directed to an energetic of violence in the world. And I think that's just so amazing and powerful and cool. And I actually really do believe in that. I believe in that stuff. I'm kind of outing myself to my sciencey friends. Like, I totally believe in that stuff. I've seen it happen.
But it's helpful, though. It is helpful when we have those left brain linear thought proofs, right?
Yes,
I've been a part of
totally.
some of those types of experiments as well. Through a group led by Sandra Ingerman was one of them, and it was absolutely amazing. And, you know, and also too, I don't know if you've ever heard of it or done it, but it's something that I invite people to do in the immersion program, is the rice experiment, where you take 2 jars of rice and you love one and you ignore the other. And so those kinds of left brain proofs really do that. They prove to us that there is a real power or an effect that is had when we do these intentional works, or when we are having prayer chains, this kind of thing. There is an exception, as far as I know it to be anyways, and I don't, you know, claim to be the authority on anything, but you know, the exception would be small children, because small children generally come to their parents for help of everything. You know, they're dependent on, like, I'm hungry, please help me. I have a boo-boo, please help me. I have, you know what I mean? So they turn to their parents for everything, for all support. And so, as I know it to be, a parent can bestow permission for small children. It gets a little questionable around, you know, menarche for girls. When girls start bleeding, you know, they really become their own woman. You know, maybe not that moment, but you know,
it's a threshold that they're crossing.
Yes, we got to be mindful around that, you know, 10, 11, 12 to 16 sort of age for both, you know, or all genders, right? You know, that's a hard one for parents to recognize too, is that we need to let them be their own person, and we have to respect that, even when asking for prayer or energetic support for them.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that insight, and for being willing to ask the question when, you know, we both were a part of a group posting where that kind of request was being made. And I really appreciated that you shed light on that, because it was honestly something that I hadn't fully considered before. And had this, you know, kind of have had that subtle feeling of, you know, what's really going on here when we're sending intentions and holding space and doing energy work. And also for me, just not even fully understanding how all of that stuff works, because there's a lot that I believe is still so much in mystery.
Oh, definitely.
And so because of that too, and just to be like proactive, what would you say is a way that we can hold intentions and hold space for people, maybe without their permission, or maybe it's someone that's like quite ill and they're unconscious? Yeah, like, is there a way to do that? Is there a wording? Is there a kind of approach that we could take that would be more respectful of their autonomy in that particular situation?
Yeah, I do believe so, and it is a practice that again Sandra Ingerman introduced me to, you know, and I kind of touched on it in other places as well, but she really summed it up quite well for me, and it suddenly clicked and made a lot more sense for me. And it's it relies more, instead of the sending or the giving or the changing, it's more the witnessing piece,
Mm.
because it's passive, but it's powerful, as we know from quantum physics, right? The act of observation has an effect, and so what I have learned and come across, and it's really my go-to response for everything, whether it's somebody recently was asking me to send prayers for rain to Australia's fires, for instance, or even here, actually, a couple of years ago. So disaster sites, this kind of thing, it really works for all of that, whether it's the earth or a situation, or an individual, or our own selves. And it really begins with recognizing and tapping into the sense, whether it's the sight, the vision, or the feeling, the experience of divine perfection. And it's you start with your own, connecting with your own sense of that divine quality, and really witnessing it, and watching it grow, into this feeling that can really become quite palpable. You can really feel it, and
Mm.
then finding that resonance within the other person or the situation. And so being able to then look at them and see their divinity, and see their perfection, and see um, their light. It makes me think of namaste, right? The light within me sees the light within you. And I'm sure that's an absolute simplicity that I just terribly butchered.
It's okay.
Sorry. But
It's okay.
how we see it, how
We'll
we
put the full definition of namaste in its traditional form in the show notes.
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
But to witness their divinity, it has a significant impact, and we've had those left brain proofs in some of these experiments, and same with the love rights and this kind of thing. And so we're not sending anything, we're not giving them anything more to navigate. We're just witnessing what is already there, and
Yeah.
to me it's passive, but it's also powerful, and it's not infringing on any divine plan that might be laid out for them. It's not influencing our will.
Yeah, and it did kind of strike me too when we were talking about free will and autonomy, that because I do believe that intentions and prayers, especially by large numbers of people, have an impact, that there are situations in a person's life, I've been in them myself, where accessing my own ability to choose something, whether it was something harmful or it was something good in the moment, because nothing is permanent, right? It's not permanently harmful, it's just in that moment. It was a part of my growth. It was a part of needing to make choices for myself, maybe for the first time around a particular issue. And I think back to my experience of being, I was raised in the Christian tradition, many different denominations actually, but mostly born again and Pentecostal traditions. And when I finally was ready to make an exit from that particular paradigm, and I was trying to do so as respectfully as possible, it was really difficult because you're basically letting go of an entire community that you've built your life around. I had so many people say to me in the months that followed, and even years later, like, I'll be praying for you, or I'm praying for you, or we're praying that you find your way back to the Lord. Right. And there was just something so visceral in me that almost felt angry about that, where I was like, I don't want you to pray for me. I don't want you to interfere with this first really big and deep act of like self-initiation and determination for me, because I didn't actually choose this religion. It was something that I was like raised with as a child, and my child mind just embraced it until I was ready to start making my own choices. And I so needed to be in that season where I was making that choice. And it was a choice that was that a lot of people didn't agree with. So they were praying that I would not make that choice. Right. And so I just wanted to offer that example as just a piece of what it can look like to be, oh, and that's my dog drinking water from his bowl. What it can look like to basically put our own projected idea of rightness and what is somebody's path on them when they have a completely different experience of what that is and what's going on. And yeah, so that was a difficult time for me to navigate through, because I felt like I was actually contending with these prayers, that it was like, and even any time that I might have felt the smallest inkling to like go back to church or go see someone, I was like even more determined not to. It's like, no, I'm not going to fall for the prayers.
It's a powerful example. It's a powerful example.
Yeah. And it was challenging. So it's funny because I'm saying like, oh, I don't really totally understand how all of this works, but you know what? I actually do. Yeah. Not all of it, but some of it, because I've had those experiences. And I think that's why I try to be so careful about, to the best of my ability as a human being, how I am holding and sending and doing all of those things with other people in my own world, because I don't want to project my will on them. I don't want, like you said, I don't want to take away that experience, that moment of the butterfly breaking out of the cocoon, because that is a powerful moment. That's an initiation. That's a crossing of the threshold, and it's important. And so, yeah, just really, it's an interesting shift for me in my mind, even this last week, and how I'm looking at all of that. And I really have you to thank for that. And this conversation around, first, language, and like, secondly, what are we actually doing when we do these things, and how can we do them with love and honor and respect for people's autonomy. Let me gather myself. A reclamation prayer by Shiloh Sophia. I call myself back from the four and many corners, from the curves of the earth and cosmos, from the time, space, place, both far and near. I gather myself up. I call myself back from the hidden domains, the places I said yes because I did not know what was involved in really knowing. I call myself back from the visible dimensions, the places I said yes to seeing because I was hungry for more, for the forbidden, perhaps even seeking power not my own. I call myself inward, separating strand by strand from traditions and patterns taken on, codes imbibed, even in beauty, separating energies transmitted to me without my conscious consent. I call myself inward from any place I have been where I was not invited, where I, knowing or unknowing, entered the domain of another, trying to help or to heal. I reclaim my field from the foreign and far-reaching, from the dimensional domains that are not coded for my particular place in the earth, air, fire, water, star, formed by the breath of the divine. I reclaim my field sealed from systems, programs, functions, friend or foe or entity with which I am presently embedded or engaged, casting out from me in the name of the one anything not mine, creating a clear field. I choose to inhabit this temple, this earthly vessel which is mine to inhabit, my cosmic address, to choose to live here now and not in some other world system gone too far afield. I choose to inhabit this temple, the DNA, the blood, the bone, the organ, the tone, the breath, the holy map of me as mystic, and declare it is more than enough, with plenty of mystery to weave. Oh, when I have gone too far afield, may I remember to gather myself, to make amends with all I can, while I have been distracted by the desire for knowing or having and found myself lost on some other path. When I have gone too far afield, I pray, great lady, you will gather me back into the folds of your garment, light the candles of your wisdom table, and tell me stories that remind me who I am and who you are to me. May I be at cause for shaping both the container and the content for which I have been made responsible, taking great care with what goes in and what comes out to be offered. May I be at cause for the tending of my own alchemy before sending out continual signals that I am available to support the transformation of others. It is time for discernment, even in service. Let me gather myself into this story, creating boundaries around my beingness that my consciousness may be whole, only opening to that which is on my path, resisting the temptations and elixirs not stirred and offered in alignment. Let me gather myself into this story, an intentionally created path with heart and hope, narrow though it may be, with gifts enough to last a lifetime. Creator, will you quench my thirst, even to heal, with your living water? To all who have served me, I say thank you. To all I have served and attempted to, I say thank you. To my Creator, I say thank you, thank you, thank you. And I have gathered myself from the four and many corners.
To be able to trust in the greater mystery, or the greater consciousness, or the greater cosmology or natural law of things, it really, I think, helps keep our ego in check, or realize that it's just not possible for us to know the why of everything.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, admittedly, that's probably the biggest challenge for me in life is, I was that kid where when I was actually cognizant of what flight was for a bird, I was like, okay, I'm sorry, universe, why can't I do that? This does not make any sense. Why can a bird fly, but I can't fly? And I've been asking those kind of questions my entire life, and the universe is always just kind of winking at me, and not giving me the answer.
Good.
Yeah, and there's so much richness in that, actually, in just being comfortable with uncertainty and being in mystery, and actually kind of finding my habitation in mystery now, where I can really inhabit that place and actually feel so safe there. I actually feel safer inside of the mystery than in any polarized, dogmatic, absolute truth. I really do. I feel safer in mystery and uncertainty. So
Yeah.
taken a while to get there, but yeah. And I want to continue this conversation around language and kind of bring it into another area that I have seen you walking with so much integrity and intention, and that is the use of the word shaman, and the word shamanism in reference to a particular kind of spiritual practice and life way. And I know that that is actually something that you have in community and through your own offerings and website. You've been talking about starting to I don't want to necessarily say like remove or scratch it out, but replace it with something that is more in alignment and resonance, and that isn't appropriating in any way. And I would so love to kind of let you share your journey around that, because I think that it will resonate for many people.
Yeah, thank you. It's a tender one. I'm going to acknowledge that right away. It's tender in a lot of different ways. It's one of those terms that a lot of people have very different stances on, and it can become quite passionate. People become quite passionate about their views on its usage, and so and also that world or that community is, even though there's a lot of us who identify in those ways, these practices, the community is also kind of small. And so
Right.
I want to really acknowledge and hold tender that this is, my journey or my experience, and that I don't cast judgment or anything um, on those who are sticking with the terms. So I just want to put that out there before I
Yeah.
start. So in my practice, in the apprenticeship that I was in, um, the term shamanism, that was the term for it, for what we did, and it was fairly specific to the the method of altering consciousness, the cosmology in that altered consciousness, and the type of healing work that is done there, as far as retrieving what has been lost, and then removing what doesn't belong, this kind of thing. So as we sort of know it here in the West, shamanism is actually quite narrow,
Hmm.
and kind of like yoga. It is a small piece, even still, of a greater philosophy and a greater lifestyle and a greater practice. And so, shaman and shamanism, is a term from a very specific tribe in Siberia, and I'm not going to name names, but anthropologists
Mm-hmm.
uh, coined the term, or brought the term back to the West, and um, began finding similarities all around the world, with these practices of medicine men and medicine women, and spiritual, like witch doctors or this kind of thing, and found some very commonalities between them all. And that, I think that's really quite beautiful, to recognize the commonalities around the world, and then yet also too, the richness of culture was let fall away, and yet this one term began to be applied to them all. Um,
Okay, so it's kind of almost just putting that umbrella over many different practices.
yeah, in different cultures, and there's similarities, yes, for sure. Yeah, and so now what happened is the common parts, the universal parts were um, freely, not free, but like they were taught in here in the West, and their knowledge began to spread, and so there's all sorts of teachers, apprenticeships, this kind of thing in shamanism, and that is how I was introduced, and was able to put context to my spiritual life, was through these um, schools, I guess, or schools of thought.
Mhm.
Um, and I've been running along with it, and as you know, or people who know me know, I run year-long immersion programs. I hold journey circles. I have all sorts of events, and gatherings, and I've always used the word shamanism quite liberally, because that's how I knew it. That's just how
Yeah.
I was taught. That's what I knew it to be.
Yeah.
And and then and I even knew the source of the word, and as people do, I just thought of it as a borrowed term. English is made up of all sorts of words from all sorts of languages, and we don't even know it usually.
Mm-hmm.
But it began to really come to my awareness, especially as we're getting a little bit more mindful of appropriation and reconciliation, and really tracking, where does this practice come from, and some of my immersion is really based around looking into our own cultures and our own heritage, and drawing from that. And so it just began to stick in my mind a little bit more that that it wasn't quite a fitting term, at least in my heritage. And I do have a colleague who really dove deeply into rephrasing her practice and her use of language, and really called for us all to do the same. And it made sense to me. And but it was very daunting. Aside from just habit and sheer content, I also didn't know how to express what I was offering without this term, because in the West, as I was saying, it really refers to a very specific set of practices. And so, if somebody's coming to me for a, quote unquote shamanic session, they know that I'm talking about soul retrievals and extractions and crystal unraveling and this kind of thing. And so, I think it took definitely over a year. It might have taken me 2 years to try to wrap my head around, well, how can I express accurately, as we understand it, what I'm offering, and yet not be using this term that is really quite inappropriate. And so it took me a long time. And I'm finally just at that stage of, I've just rewritten 2 websites. I still have a whole bunch of content to rewrite, but I'm not able to go back and change everything, but I can change where I'm going forward. And so I'm just trying to be a little bit more mindful, even drawing on my own cultural language. It doesn't mean anything to anybody here. So it's kind of like steps into that sort of vague spiritual realm of, and that's not really helpful for anybody either. And so it's definitely been something I've had to sit with for a long time and feel out in all the different ways, and to not, act out of urgency. Because there was definitely a sense of urgency. First there was shame, and then there was urgency, and then I was just stuck, about how to address this in a way that feels good and right and efficient and proper. And it just kind of built to a time where I couldn't even talk about my practice anymore. I just felt like I couldn't with authenticity really share anything, because the language didn't resonate with me anymore. And so I've had to just dive in there and change what I can. And the same as I think you mentioned earlier about smudging and seining, and smudging.
Yeah, the difference between those 2 words.
Yeah. And I mean, we're all going to have different words for it based on our heritage. In English, it could easily just be smoke bath or smoke clearing or cleansing, this kind of thing. Smoke, but recognizing that smudging, even though that's perhaps what we've known it to be called for so long, recognizing that it is an Indigenous term, and really looking at, how do we feel about using that? Does that feel resonant? Does that feel right? Does it feel respectful to them? Not what do we think, but to people who perhaps it has a greater impact or a feeling for, and really looking at our relationship with that. And so for me, with the Scottish and Irish, I mean, the Scottish term of seining, that was excellent to shift into, and other cultures may need to look a little harder.
Examine that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to read something from one of the articles that you have written about this topic, because I think it just kind of reaffirms what you were just saying, and it's really beautiful. If you don't mind, it's just a paragraph.
Sure.
And you say, much of my spiritual teaching practice is based on reclaiming our own forgotten or misplaced cultural practices. The majority of us have been severed from rich ancestral traditions for all sorts of reasons. Part of this process includes diving deeply into the why a practice, ritual, ceremony is done, cultivating intimate and reciprocal relationships with the plants, animals, elements, and guides involved, plus researching myths, stories, and lore from the lands our families came from, sitting with elders and spirit teachers, reading and listening intently, and importantly, discovering and remedying appropriated methods and terms. This fills our cup of longing for deeper purpose to this living experience. It brings us fertile ground for ceremony, spiritual holding, and of course, our own well-being and that of our communities and the natural world around us. When we are intact in this way, we can appreciate the differences and similarities found around the world in a beautiful way. But when this cup of ours is empty, we are much more likely to grab and fill from cultures we witness who are undergoing their own revitalization process, even when we don't intend harm. And I just love that so much. I love what you have written there. It's so succinct. It's so deeply intentional. And thank you for writing that.
I forgot that I wrote it.
Yes, I know. Probably it was like kind of like coming through you. But those words are so valuable to me, because I think that without shaming and without finger pointing, it's just saying, hey, let's examine this. Let's be curious about this and do the work to find new/old language and start to bring that in so that we can allow a return and a revitalization of these words that actually belong to other communities, right? And it's powerful and it's respectful, and I think it's such a great way to kind of summarize what we've been talking about. Yeah, if there's anything you wanted to add to that, to your own words.
My own word. I do want to bring it back actually to something that we began this call with, was that we have time. We don't need to act out of urgency and overwhelm, because that's just paralyzing and crazy making. But we have time, and we can sit with these things and really get comfortable, knowing deeply, not just with our head because this is what somebody said, but a knowing that's more anchored in our bodies. When we make these explorations, or when we make these changes, that we can do so with a conviction, because we sat with it. We sat with it, and we took time with it, and we got to know it and how we relate to it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And speaking of time, you're currently living in such a beautiful place in what you call the sanctuary, and you are showing up to your slow cooked life in such a beautiful way. And I have been really inspired lately by a photo series that you've started on social media called Lost and Found, Please Claim. And for those of you who are listening, it's going to sound kind of funny, but Juliette is beach combing for garbage and taking pictures of it in these sort of beautiful settings. You have an amazing camera where you see like a piece of styrofoam and then like a sunset behind it, and these incredible juxtapositions really of what I would say is our disconnection from our garbage, and also our inextricable connection to the earth and to the ocean. And like, there's really no way that there's no such thing as throwing something away. Oh, where is away, right? Oh, well, away happens to be the ocean, or happens to be your local water system, or the dump. And so when I've been looking at the photos in this series, it's just been a lot of mixed feelings, actually.
Yeah.
It stirs a lot. And I've seen that in other people's reactions. I've read other people's comments, and yeah, really, really mixed emotions. And looking at those pictures, and a part of you, it's some of the pictures are funny, like the meta-ness of the seahorse, stuffed seahorse that's washed up on the shore, like a toy seahorse. Yeah, so I'm finding myself kind of giggling at some of them, and then also feeling like this really deep sense of visceral sorrow and grief for the state of things and the way that garbage is in the ocean and is untended to. And I would just love to hear, how did this practice start for you? What was the inspiration behind it? And what is the drive or the motivation that keeps you going back and keeping this series alive?
Thank you. I want to thank you for all that you've just said about it too, because it's pretty easy to feel like a bit of a weirdo, um, you know, getting down on the ground for that perfect angle of the, you know, the sunbeam hitting the, you know, the piece of Lego. Um, and yeah, and yet it does stir up so many emotions within myself, and really that's where it began, um, was noticing exactly that, the juxtaposition of, here I am in a beautiful place. I mean, currently it's the bay here, but um, you know, it's also been in the forests and this kind of thing. And then you're just in awe at the incredible richness and beauty of the natural world. And then, oh look, there's a granola bar wrapper,
Yeah.
and so out of place. And yet people would walk past it and not even notice it, let alone feel compelled to pick it up. And so the idea was sort of planted gently, just by noticing, again, observation, right? And then, and I think I might have taken a couple of photos. I've been trying to track. Somebody recently asked me when did it start. I started a business meeting that was about something completely different, and the first words were, you know, so you take pictures of garbage. Yeah, I do. And then the question, I was like, yeah, I wonder when did that start? But it really started in earnest on one of the Gulf Islands here. I was um, facilitating a vision quest for somebody who'd been moving through the immersion programs with me, and so I was there with, you know, no distractions, right?
Yeah.
And noticing the high volume of trash, and I started to gather it together, and the thought was, you know, I was also finding shells and lovely little flowers and things like that, and feathers, and I thought, oh, you know, sort of a visual, because I do make these mandala like offerings
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, these natural treasures representing, you know, the earth, and then surrounding by the trash that I find. And and it grew and grew and grew over the days that I was there, and I didn't really have a wide range of exploration. I stayed fairly close to my sleeping spot, and the volume was, it was atrocious, and it began to really make me consider, and um, well, a lot of things, but, you know, looking at what I had created as sort of a medicine wheel for our times. And, you know, at the time there had been wildfires. We almost couldn't go on this vision quest because of smoke, this kind of thing. And there was a lot of talk in media around the new normal, and how there was darkness in the day because of the smoke so thick that it blocks out the sun. And so in my experience, it was like, is this the new normal?
Was that Naomi Klein who wrote that article? I'm just trying to. I want to maybe put that up because it's. I remember what you're talking about, the new normal with the smoke being the darkness every summer,
um,
and
I'm not sure, to
okay,
be honest. I'm not too sure if I read an article but I feel like it kind of came into language. It came
yeah,
into common usage, because I do know that I saw it more than once.
yeah,
So it may very well have also been an article. I'd love to check and see if I've seen it yet or
yeah,
not.
yeah,
Um, but, you know, going along with our disconnect from the world around us, or our spiritual practices, or our heritage, or even just, you know, the cycles of the world, um, you know, there's a dependability that we have, you know, a natural law around dawn follows every dark night, you know, spring comes after every winter. And
right,
at the time, it really, that was kind of in question, you
yeah,
know, can we trust that dawn follows every dark night? Maybe we can't anymore.
yeah,
And so this quote unquote sort of medicine wheel, where traditionally it would be map to anchor by, to show us the natural ebb and flow of things and the movement through different medicines in a good way. Now is we're now held by trash, our disconnect with the world. And so that was when it really hit me. I completely broke down. I was an absolute mess. So, I'll just cry just thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Chasing these tiny little balls of styrofoam in the wind on the beach. It just really, really shook me to my core. And so that was some of the first photos that I took. But it wasn't really the start of the series, as a series that began after I moved here, and I was walking the beach so often, and I'm just like, wow, look at all this trash here, and it's very easy to take beautiful photos of where you are. People go through great lengths to take, Instagram worthy photos, but nobody's really noticing the trash, and people would come walking with me, and I'd be, compulsively picking up all the things that I find, and so many times my friends would say to me, like, oh, I didn't even see that.
Yes.
And so here's a way to see that. And I do try to not make it so depressing, because it's very easy to go there, and then we just shut down, right?
Yeah.
So I do try to take photos that are, artsy.
Yeah.
The full moon aligned with a, piece of circuitry.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's the words that you use to, like, sometimes they're like cheeky and sort of punny, and it's what you've done is made it something that you can go back to over and over again without being afraid that it's going to traumatize you, which is happening with a lot of things, right? A lot of images, like, some people are afraid to even go on their social media accounts because they're like, I just can't see anymore. But the way that you've done it and the way that it's presented, I don't want to say it's,
I want to make light of it.
I don't want to say it's lighthearted, but I want to say that it's gritty and approachable, right? So it's something that you can enjoy looking at.
Thank you. I just wanted to be able to visually demonstrate either both our connection and our disconnection with the natural world around us and our garbage. And often people are commenting, I find it difficult because people will comment with wonderful things to say, praise and gratitude for it, and yet I'm like, but really, all I'm doing is moving from one place to another. I'm bringing it to the recycling station, where it also leaves a footprint and it just degrades further until it can't be, or I'm bringing it to the transfer station. I know in Squamish there's a landfill, but here we ship it out, and I believe they actually ship it to different countries.
Which is a whole nother issue of oppression, and offloading our garbage onto other people is not okay. It's not okay. Yeah,
exactly. And so I'm like, it's also easy for me to get quite overwhelmed at the knowing that I'm not actually making a difference. I'm just moving it, but I'm bringing at least some awareness through this series, and people have asked me for prints, which is very sweet. And I wasn't sure if, I would ask them, like, do you mean of the garbage ones or the nice ones? Because I try to throw in some nice ones too. So it's like, look at this is the beautiful place that this moldy sock is sitting, or, the beer cans are. And so, so I have that. People can have their trashy photos printed if they so wish, can top amongst the stones, this kind of thing.
Well, I held a painting retreat at Juliette's space, for those who are listening, and on one of our beach walks, Juliette had us for 3 women, help her carry this big, sort of abandoned fishing rope.
Yeah, it was huge. I could not have done it
It
on
was
my own.
massive. Yeah, it was really big. So we did this march across the beach with this big rope and, sort of took it off the beach. And
I wish I had kept it, to be honest.
you could use it for something.
It would have been great nautical decor.
Yeah, but I work. Sorry, not work closely. I'm very closely connected to the work of Joanna Macy and this whole paradigm of ecological grief work. And it's been so valuable for me to connect to my own grief over what is happening to the natural world. And I'm a part of the natural world. So it's grief for all. It's grief for all of the levels. And there's a subtlety to this grief, and we don't always know how to name it, but calling it ecological grief is something that I learned from the work that reconnects, which is an immersive experience that I've been a part of. And it really is valuable to have these experiences where you are looking for the trash on the beach, or you're taking a photo of it, or you're carrying a rope with 3 other people that could possibly like strangle a sea animal. Because even though, like you said, you're not changing the world in that moment, essentially, but you are in an act of reverence to life.
Exactly.
You are in service to life. And that is pretty much, I feel like, the only antidote right now to that deep level of ecological grief that I'm experiencing, is doing every beautiful action I can to be in service of life. Because I actually believe that is felt, and it's an energetic that if more and more and more and more of us hold, the scales will start to tip, the dial will start to move. And so I just really deeply appreciate that you're doing that in visual form, because what I'm accessing when I see those photos is a moment to actually be with my ecological grief and just acknowledge it and feel it in my body and be like, yeah, wow, we create things that can't break down, and then they float in the water. And and it's not so much for me to go down that really dark rabbit hole of how basically everything is polluted and we're all screwed.
Yeah.
Because I could go there, and sometimes I do if I really need to, but it's more the opposite end of that coin, which is like, this woman, this person that I love, has eyes to see, and her eyes are becoming my eyes and other people's eyes, and we're noticing, and we're in that subtlety, and there's a connection that's happening. And that's what matters to me more than anything else, right? Is that we're in connection with it. So yes, I love it. And I also want to thank you so much for taking that garbage to the landfill and taking that extra step, because although it's going to go somewhere else eventually, and maybe to another landfill somewhere else, at least it's not being ingested by like the sea creatures on the beach and other living organisms that could be harmed by it. And I want to just quickly say too, for our listeners, Juliette, if you want to support her in actually covering the costs of taking this garbage to the landfill, because it does cost money to do that, she's doing it on her own dime, and I know this for a fact. I just want to plug your Patreon right now, because I would love to see you be supported in this endeavor. And again, like, this is a way you can support Juliette, but this is also a way that you can be acting on behalf of all life, right? Is supporting someone who is taking action in this way. So if you want to support Juliette, you can go to Patreon and find her at Juliette Woods. It's pretty simple. And then also the photo series, if anyone's curious and wants to check it out, just go, would it be Instagram, Juliette? At Juliette Faye Woods. So it's Juliette, JULIETTE FAEWOODS, Juliette Faye Woods. And just take a look so you know what we're talking about. And I hope that you'll get some connection and some catharsis and some awareness from checking out that incredible photo series.
Thank you. And to be honest, it's really just sort of grown into this. Like, there was just no way that I could notice the trash there and not pick it up. Like, it really was an act of reciprocity. We, in spiritual walks, we're often talking about making sure you leave an offering behind. If you are called to bring a stone home with you or a feather or something, to always leave an offering behind, this kind of thing. And for me, walking the same stretch of beach and tending to it by picking up the trash that I find, it really is an act of reciprocity, of gratitude for all that it gives us. To be able to go to a place in nature and find our solace and find our restoration, and be moved to tears sometimes at the beauty, or feel a sense of awe. It's almost like how can you not pick
Yeah.
that wrapper? It's such a small and yet powerful relationship with the land where you are. And it could just be even down a city street. There's still nature to be seen and tended to and cared for, so it doesn't really matter where you are. And I do invite people to, I've been starting this hashtag of lost and found, please claim. And so other folks who are perhaps embarking on this way of relating to the land that they're on, when they find trash in beauty, trash in paradise, take a photo of it and use that hashtag if you're on Instagram. And it helps us feel like we're not just alone in caring. We can feel a greater community.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I think there can be a sense when you're walking along a river or a beach, or a street, and you see garbage, to think, well, there's no point in picking it up, right? Because another piece of garbage is just going to replace it. But the point is that you're connecting into a deep reverence in that moment with something that you care about. And even if that just becomes a part of your individual practice, like, it does make a difference to you and to your relationship with all life. Even if it doesn't make a difference to maybe, the whole world, or to onlookers or anyone else, it makes a difference to your relationship to life. And so I definitely encourage people to take that invitation and take some garbage out of some places that you love, and share images with us, and maybe we can start a movement. Start a lost and found, please claim movement.
Yeah, it's like someone has lost this. The ones and I use this word very loosely, my favorites are, like you mentioned, the ones that are often it's children's toys, but it's meant to instill a love for the sea, and yet here it is poisoning it at the same time. It's like that energy is just too great. So I often put out that tongue-in-cheek invitation of, please claim, 6 cigarette butts, please claim, down at the front desk.
Yeah.
Get them.
Take them back. Well, that's one of the things that I would love to start seeing, actually, is that we could ship all of our waste back to the corporations who made them, and that they would have to deal with them somehow that was environmentally sound. So in some countries, that is what they do. Like in Sweden, a lot of products you can send right back to the manufacturer, the corporation who was behind the manufacture of them, and they will actually have to recycle them on your behalf. So that would shift a lot of things. But anyways, it's a good thing to do. Just go to the beach, have a beautiful connection, and just pick up the things that could do some harm, and put them in a place where they'll do less harm. And that's a big theme these days. How can we do less harm?
Harm reduction.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, Juliette. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to have this conversation with me. Like I said, you're the kind of person that being in your presence, being in conversation with you, so deeply inspires me to remember what's important to me and to hold that reverence. And you do that so effortlessly. It's just that you're integrated with that way of life and you're living it, and so it ripples out, and really touches my heart. And I just feel so privileged and blessed to know you. And yeah, I just so appreciate your wisdom today and your sharing. And
I just want to breathe those words in.
please do.
Thank you. What an absolute blessing. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this wonderful venture that you are putting together. You are definitely one of my favorite people on the planet, and always inspiring me with how you approach the world and how you bring your medicine forward. It's been an absolute treat to know you, and so thank you for inviting me into this wonderful expression. That I'm really excited to listen to all your other podcasts and see where you're going, and the goodness that you recognize in the world. So that's a real treat and blessing for us all.
Yeah, it's exciting to be, actually doing this, and I feel like I'm following a meandering path, but it's a path that is full of wonder and beauty. And like I said, the value that I have derived from having conversations with women like you and so many others, it's just almost incalculable, like the impact it's had on my life. And I just really want to share that forward. And so this is how we're doing it. This is how we do it. And we have this opportunity also to have these slowed down, like we talked about, the slow cooked conversation that are long form, and we can really engage on things and go a little bit deeper, because we're kind of deep. Juliette and I was commenting on how our images for our Zoom accounts are like, both of us are looking off into the distance, like super deep. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so like cliche us. We're so deep, and we like to go deep. But also what I love about the ways that our conversations flow and move is that it's like we always come up for air, and there's always a laugh, and there's always just this tenderness of the feminine spirit that just fills me with so much delight and so much joy. And yeah, so thank you for being a part of that. Now, I would really love for our listeners to be able to connect with you and your offerings, and there are many of them. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of time right now to talk to us about the work you're doing in the world and how we can connect with you in the many ways.
Thank you. There are many ways. I would say if the Return to Reverence immersion, there's 2 year-long immersion programs that are available in person and online. And that's really, like I said in the beginning, really geared towards cultivating a personal spiritual practice of methods that resonate with each individual, drawing on the realigning with the natural world and drawing on forgotten cultural practices. So that's at returntoreverence.ca.
Okay.
And for sessions, or for buying prints, or for articles, I've written a lot of articles. You could go to threefoldbalance.com, so number 3 foldbalance.com. There's a lot there. I like to offer as much as I can that is freely available as well. So there's articles that may not be supportive. And there's also a YouTube channel, a Threefold Balance YouTube channel, that has spiritual practice supports as well.
Yeah, I do encourage anyone listening to check those out, because the articles are so well written and kind of potent, and so I've personally gotten a lot out of them, and I've really valued them a lot. So thank you
Coming
for that.
from such a poetic writer, that's a pretty big endorsement. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Wonderful. Well, Juliette, thank you again so much. And I actually wanted to end our session with a blessing that you bestowed upon me. You gave me a gift once, and I've had it on my fridge forever, and I look at it so often, and I just think it's so fitting to end our conversation today. I return to reverence and allow an unfolding to take me deeper into the heady scent of a life well lived in grace and trust. I am guided, guarded, shielded, and protected. Yes, thank you. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in and listened to this conversation, especially if you listened all the way to the end. We can only hope. And if you have heard anything today that was super yummy and exciting and something that you want to start cultivating in your life, as I have said in the introduction to this show, I just encourage you to go out there and go gather some.
I'll have what she's having.
Thanks everyone for listening. The opening music for this show was Bittersweet by Kevin MacLeod from filmmusic.io. You also heard in the podcast intro Karma Cat by Diala and the song Slow Decay by Ingrid Witt. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please consider giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts and perhaps a review. Also, you can follow us at ihwsh.pod on Instagram, where we'll give you all kinds of updates about who's coming up on the show. And we thank you in advance for sharing us with those you think it will resonate with. Have a great day.